The 2026 FIFA World Cup begins on June 11th. 48 national teams, 11 American cities, the largest sporting event in human history, watched by 5 billion people across the planet. And this week, Donald Trump's special envoy for anti-Semitism told a conference in Brussels that world leaders who have criticized Israel's policies may be barred from entering the United States to watch it. Not fans, not journalists, heads of state, prime ministers, presidents, Erdogan of Turkey, who called Netanyahu the Hitler of our time and threatened military action against Israel, may not be allowed into the United States to watch the Turkish national team play. Sanchez of Spain, who suspended his country's arms sales to Israel and called for a ceasefire, may face the same barrier. The man delivering this message is Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan, appointed by Trump as the United States' special envoy for monitoring and combating anti-Semitism. His words at the Brussels conference were unambiguous. We are holding countries accountable for ministers who make such statements, and they are not allowed entry into the country. Most people watching this story see it as a dramatic escalation in Trump's confrontation with European leaders, a political provocation, another front in the culture war. And they are right that it is all of those things. But they are missing the structural dimension that makes this story genuinely consequential in a way that goes far beyond Erdogan or Sanchez or any individual visa decision. What Trump is doing with the 2026 World Cup is something that has been attempted before in sporting history. And the structural record of what happens when powerful countries try to turn the world's largest sporting events into coercive political instruments is clear. It does not work the way the coercing power intends. It works against the coercing power in ways that accumulate slowly and land hard. If you are learning something here, please hit subscribe. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Let me start with the precise mechanism being deployed, because understanding the mechanism is the key to understanding the structural outcome. The United States is not boycotting the World Cup. The United States is hosting the World Cup. That is the first structural distinction that makes this situation unusual in the history of sports and politics. Historical examples of sports coercion have generally involved one of two patterns. The first pattern is the boycott. A country refuses to send its athletes to a rival's event in protest of that rival's political behavior. The second pattern is the ban. A governing body excludes a country from competition because of that country's conduct. Russia after Ukraine is the most recent example. Apartheid South Africa is the most famous. What Trump is doing fits neither pattern. He is hosting the event and simultaneously threatening to exclude political leaders of participating nations from entering the host country. This is structurally new, and structurally new configurations in geopolitics tend to produce consequences that the actor initiating them did not fully model. Now I want to go deeper, because this is where most people's analysis completely breaks down. The first structural force is what I call the coercion inversion, and it operates through a mechanism that is deeply counterintuitive until you understand the game theory. When a country uses a sporting event as a coercive instrument, it assumes that the target of the coercion will feel the pressure and modify its behavior. This assumption underlies every sporting boycott and ban in history. Carter assumed that barring Americans from Moscow in 1980 would pressure the Soviet Union to leave Afghanistan. It did not. The Soviets stayed in Afghanistan for 9 more years. Carter lost his re-election campaign in a landslide, partly because the boycott was seen domestically as having cost American athletes their dreams without achieving any political purpose. The structural reason boycotts and sport-based coercion consistently underperform is that they produce a visible symbol of the coercer's power that simultaneously generates global sympathy for the target. Moscow 1980 did not make the Soviet Union look like the aggressor in the eyes of the world's sports-watching public. It made the Soviet athletes who competed look like the victims of American political maneuvering. The sympathy flowed toward the wrong party from Washington's perspective. Apply that structural logic to 2026. If Erdogan is barred from entering the United States to watch Turkey play, who wins the optics of that moment? A Turkish president who cannot attend his own country's World Cup matches on American soil because he criticized Israel. That image, photographed, shared, discussed by 5 billion people watching the tournament, does not make Turkey look like the villain. It makes the United States look like a country that is using its hosting privilege as a tool of political intimidation. The second structural force is the credibility of the host. Hosting a World Cup is not just an economic decision. It is a statement about the kind of country you are. Every host in World Cup history has used the tournament to project an image of openness, stability, and global belonging. Japan and South Korea in 2002 projected Asian economic dynamism and reconciliation. Germany in 2006 projected a democratic, modern nation that had transcended its darkest history. Qatar in 2022 sought, with mixed success, to project modernization and regional significance. Brazil in 2014, despite its problems, offered the world carnival and color and passion. What does the United States project in 2026? A country that has banned citizens from 39 nations from entering at all. A country where journalists are warned to carry burner phones and have contingency plans for ICE detention. A country where tourists with valid visas have been arrested. A country whose president warned the Iranian national soccer team, which has qualified for the tournament, that their life and safety would be at risk if they came to play. Keep that last point in the back of your mind because we are coming back to it. The World Cup was supposed to bring $30 billion in economic activity to the United States. It was supposed to be Trump's legacy moment. The president who brought the world to American stadiums, who showed that America under his leadership was the indispensable center of global culture and sport. FIFA president Gianni Infantino, who gave Trump a peace award weeks before the bombs fell on Iran, is still insisting the tournament will proceed as planned. But the hotel booking data is already telling a different story. New York City hotel bookings for World Cup dates are trending 2% below the same period last year, when no major event was scheduled. The city comptroller estimates that even under optimistic scenarios, New York may actually lose money on the tournament because policing and infrastructure costs exceed projected tourism gains. And that was before the antisemitism envoy announced that heads of state might be turned away at the border. The third structural force is the precedent problem, and this one extends far beyond the World Cup itself. The argument being made by Kaplan in Brussels is not limited to the World Cup. The argument is that the United States will evaluate the public statements of foreign leaders about Israel and restrict their entry to the United States accordingly. This argument, if consistently applied, creates a new category of American foreign policy, the political statement visa. Think about what that means structurally. Dozens of world leaders have made statements that the Trump administration could classify as anti-Semitic under its working definition. The prime ministers of Belgium, Ireland, and Canada, the presidents of Colombia, Brazil, and South Africa, the heads of government of most Muslim-majority countries. If entry to the United States becomes contingent on maintaining positions on Israel that the Trump administration finds acceptable, the United States has effectively imposed a political loyalty test on the entire international leadership class. This is not a marginal or technical legal development. It is a fundamental assertion about the relationship between American power and the freedom of political expression by foreign leaders. And it is an assertion that will be tested not once during the World Cup, but continuously at every international engagement, every state visit, every diplomatic conference, every UN General Assembly. The historical parallel that keeps returning to me is not 1980 Moscow. It is more specific and more uncomfortable. I want to take you to the British Empire in the late 19th century. At the height of its power, Britain used its position at the center of the global order, not just through military force, but through the assertion that British norms, British laws, and British political standards applied wherever British interests were present. British courts claimed jurisdiction over events in distant territories. British commercial law governed transactions on the other side of the world. British diplomatic preferences shaped the governments of nominally independent states. This expansion of jurisdiction was not experienced as neutral or benign by the countries subject to it. It was experienced as precisely what it was: the transformation of geographic power into normative power. The assertion that being part of the British system meant accepting British definitions of acceptable political conduct. The structural lesson of the British Empire's eventual decline is not that it was defeated militarily. It is that the expansion of normative claims beyond what the underlying power balance could sustain created a steady accumulation of resentment that eventually exceeded the empire's capacity to manage. Each new assertion of British jurisdiction that felt unjust in the receiving country added a small quantity of motivation to resist. Those small quantities accumulated over decades into the movements that dismantled the empire, not through confrontation, but through withdrawal. What Trump is doing with the World Cup anti-Semitism ban is a smaller but structurally similar assertion. The United States is the host. America's hosting of the World Cup now requires foreign leaders to hold positions acceptable to the American government on a specific foreign policy issue. That requirement, once stated, does not stay contained to the World Cup. It becomes a template. It is extended to other venues, other events, other political conditions of entry. And every extension of that template is experienced by the country subject to it as the same thing the British assertion of normative jurisdiction was experienced. Not as legitimate authority, but as the arbitrary use of power by a country that has confused its ability to impose a standard with the right to set one. Now let me address the argument that is most commonly made in defense of this policy, because it deserves a serious answer before I show you why it ultimately fails. The argument goes like this. Countries have always controlled who enters their territory. The United States has the sovereign right to decide which foreign nationals, including heads of state, are permitted to enter. If a foreign leader has made statements that qualify as anti-Semitic under American law and executive order, the United States is within its rights to enforce those standards at its own border. This is not an extraordinary power. It is the ordinary exercise of sovereign authority. And anti-Semitism is a genuine problem that deserves a serious policy response. Every element of that argument is legally and formally correct, and it completely misses the structural reality. Here is the reality. The question is not whether America has the legal authority to bar foreign leaders. The question is what the exercise of that authority costs in terms of America's ability to maintain the international coalition that its global position requires. Because the Erdogans and Sanchez of the world are not isolated figures. They represent voting blocs, diplomatic alignments, and public opinion formations that affect American objectives across dozens of issue areas, from NATO solidarity to trade negotiations to the Hormuz crisis to the Iran ceasefire to Chinese competition in the global south. Barring Erdogan from a soccer tournament does not bring Turkey closer to American positions on any of those issues. It pushes Turkey further away, and it does so publicly, during the most watched sporting event in human history, in front of 5 billion people who are capable of drawing their own conclusions about what they are seeing. Think about what that means for the ordinary Turkish family watching their national team play on television. Their president cannot be in the stadium because an American rabbi appointed by Donald Trump decided that his speeches about Palestine were anti-Semitic. That is the image that family will carry. That is the story their country will tell about what American soft power looks like in 2026. The 1980 Olympic boycott failed because Carter confused the ability to impose a cost on the Soviet Union with the ability to change Soviet behavior. He imposed the cost. Soviet behavior did not change. American soft power with the international athletic community was damaged for a generation. Trump is making a structurally similar error, but with an important amplification. Carter was boycotting someone else's event. Trump is using his own event as the instrument of coercion. That means the reputational cost of failure, if the policy proves ineffective, lands on America as the host, not on the target. If Erdogan is barred and Turkey plays anyway, if Sanchez is barred and Spain plays anyway, the world will have watched the United States bar the leaders of NATO allies from entering its territory in pursuit of a policy that achieved nothing politically. The image is not strength. The image is precisely what it actually is. A host country that could not convert hosting privilege into political leverage. Watch 4 things in the coming weeks before the tournament begins on June 11th. The first thing to watch is whether any formal entry ban is actually issued against a sitting head of government. The envoy made a statement at a conference. A statement at a conference is not a visa denial. If an actual entry ban is formally communicated to a foreign government, the diplomatic machinery activates. Governments recall ambassadors. Trade discussions stall. Alliance obligations become contested. Watch whether the Trump administration is willing to pay that institutional cost. The second thing to watch is FIFA's response. FIFA has a history of enforcing tournament access against the political wishes of host governments when its commercial interests are at stake. The organization generates most of its revenue from European television rights and European sponsorship. If major European governments signal that their teams will withdraw or that European broadcasters will reconsider their agreements, FIFA has financial incentives to push back on the United States. Gianni Infantino is personally close to Trump, but FIFA's institutional interests are not identical to Infantino's personal relationship. The third thing to watch is whether the Erdogan and Sanchez situations produce diplomatic consequences before June 11th. Turkey is a NATO member. Spain is a NATO member. Barring NATO heads of government from American territory is not a routine visa action. It is a statement about the relationship. Watch how NATO Secretary General Rutte responds if formal bars are issued. His reaction will signal whether the Atlantic Alliance can absorb this kind of pressure or whether it produces a visible fracture. The fourth thing to watch is the ticket and tourism data through May. If international booking for World Cup matches in American cities continues to run below expectations, the economic case for hosting deteriorates. And a World Cup that costs the host cities money while simultaneously generating global images of political coercion is precisely the legacy scenario that the tournament was supposed to prevent. The structural conclusion is this: using a sporting event as a coercive political instrument is not new. The historical record of its effectiveness is poor. The 1980 boycott did not change Soviet behavior. The 2022 Russian ban did not change Russian behavior in Ukraine. And the specific configuration Trump is deploying, using the hosting privilege itself as the coercive tool, is structurally unusual in a way that concentrates the reputational risk on the United States rather than distributing it to the targets. Every time a powerful country uses hosting to exclude rather than welcome, the global audience watching takes a small step away from the host's version of the world and toward a different story about who represents openness and who represents coercion. Those small steps accumulate. They accumulated against the British Empire. They are accumulating now. This is not prophecy. This is structural history combined with game theory. I might be wrong about whether formal bars will actually be issued or whether this remains an envoy statement that is never implemented. If I am wrong, we will come back and analyze why. Save this analysis, come back on June 11th, check whether Erdogan is in the stadium, check whether Sanchez is in the stadium, check whether the tournament generated the soft power dividend Trump expected or the reputational cost the structural analysis predicts. Subscribe if you want to follow this as it develops, because what happens in 11 American stadiums this summer will tell you something important about whether the United States still understands the difference between hard power and the soft power that makes hard power sustainable.